Alright, so welcome to your very first video for Maya 3D animation and modeling software. My name is David Cooley. I'll be your instructor. What we're looking at may at first seem really complicated and just overwhelming, and I can certainly understand because we have so many different tabs and so many different buttons, and it looks like there's buttons inside of buttons. But the first thing you need to understand is that there really is a layout to this, and the more you get comfortable with it, the easier it'll be to work with it. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that the background that you're looking at is this sort of gradient. And it's basically for show, because no matter which direction I look at this world, if I look from underneath or I look from above, you notice that this gradient hasn't changed. The gradient looks nice, but I usually don't use it when I'm working. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to simply turn that off. Okay? Now there's a hotkey, and if you're unfamiliar with what that means, a hotkey simply means that there is a key or a combination of keys that you can press on your keyboard, and it'll tell the program how to do something. Now, I'm assuming that you're using a PC and that you have a standard keyboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt button and I'm going to tap the B key. Now when I do that, you see that it goes to black. Okay? Now I'm going to do it one more time, and you see that it goes to this sort of medium gray. Well, I'm going to do it one more time and see how it starts to cycle through. It goes from black to this medium gray to this lighter shade of gray, and then back to the gradient. So if I start to click it, I'm going to find this one. Now, keep in mind, I'm a real creature of habit. This is the way that Maya looked 15 years ago when I started using it. And so this is the way that I'm most comfortable watching it. It all depends on what your own personal preference is. You'll probably hear me say this more than once. I'm a creature of habit. I enjoy not having to rethink something if it's already working for me, although that doesn't mean that I'm completely closed off to new ideas and new concepts. It simply means that when it comes down to actually getting the job done, I'm much more interested in making sure that I can get the job done than just exploring all the different options that I have, because I promise you there are a lot of options in this program. And so the first thing that we're going to start talking about is before we begin any kind of actual project, for example, your first homework assignment, your first project, your first whatever, we have to make sure that we understand the importance of creating and or setting your projects. Because what happens is, unlike a lot of other programs, let's just use Photoshop as an example, when you make a file inside of Photoshop, the more layers that you add and the more effects that you put on it, whatever it is you're doing is simply making that one file, that one Photoshop file, bigger. What this is going to do is it's going to look not just at the file that you're creating, the Maya file, but it's also going to start relying on other places. There's going to be places where your textures go for your texture library, so in order to color all of your objects. There's going to be places where your pictures go. When you're finally done with the project, there's going to be a specific folder to put there. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to come over to File, and we're going to find our project window. Now, project window assumes that you haven't made a project folder yet. Okay? So I'm going to start my first project by clicking on this, and it's going to bring up my project window. Now you'll notice that the current project is looking at something simply called default. Now what that default project is it's the very first project folder that Maya creates the very first time you open up Maya. Now if we look here, it says the location is inside of Users, the My Documents folder, inside of a Maya folder, and inside Projects. Well, keep this in mind, especially if you're using one of the computers at the school. The location of your project should be on your own drive. That means that your own thumb drive, your own external hard drive, in some way it should actually be accessing your own so that you can take it with you. Now, if you absolutely have to save something on either a computer at the school or on the Z drive, that's what we call our network, our Z drive, if you have to save something there, you have to be aware that that's not the best place to keep it for long term. It's okay to work on it if you absolutely have to. You know, if your thumb drive is filling up and you're just worried about the file size, okay, fine, you know, put it on the desktop, but temporarily. This has to be a temporary thing. You have to be able to take it with you, and most importantly, always back up your work. Now, we all know that we hear this a lot. Everybody says you got to back up your work. But very few people sometimes truly appreciate it until the really, really bad thing happens. And we all know what that bad thing is. It's a hard drive crash. I lost my thumb drive. You know, the power went out. Something bad happened to my computer. It's just an honest truth of the nature of what we're doing. You know, if all of the animation that we're going to be doing was just on paper, then when the power goes out, well, we still have a stack of paper. But for convenience sake, we have the luxury of working in the digital age. So please, at the very least, just email yourself a copy of your Maya file. It doesn't have to be the whole project folder, just the Maya file. And the nice thing about that is if you have an account like a Gmail account, Google, you have up to 30 megabytes that you can email to yourself in one email. So if you send yourself a work in progress and maybe, you know, a couple of hours later, or maybe even, you know, the next day, or just at the end of your day working, just reply to yourself from that email and attach the newest version. That way you're never going to be without it. Okay? So please consider yourself warned. You're going to hear it again, but there's going to come a point when something horrible happens and your teachers are going to seem very mean because there's nothing we can do for you. Okay? So what we're looking at right now is this thing called Current Project. Now, if I want to, I can create a brand new project. So I'm going to call this 3D Modeling Assignment 1. And if I want to, I can do underscore and then maze, because that's the project we're going to be making, a maze. Now the location, this is very, very important. Because I'm working on a computer that is my own and it's at my house, I can go into my My Documents folder and I can do whatever I want. I can put it inside of a specific place. I can, you know, save it where I want it to be. So I'm just going to put it into my personal Documents folder. Okay? So the Documents folder, my Documents folder, not the school's document folder, but this document folder is going to be just fine. Now, if I had a thumb drive plugged into my computer, I'd probably save it to that. If I had an external hard drive that I could take with me that was, you know, USB powered, I could plug it into that, knowing that I could take it with me. If you're going to save it on your own computer, just remember to bring it with you, okay? Because it's not going to do you any good if it stays there. Okay, so below the location, you're going to see this thing that says Primary Project Locations. And what this is talking about, see, these are all the default folders. And I know that it looks like there's an awful lot of them, and yeah, that's actually true, there are. But this structure, this file structure, is very, very important. Because what it's going to do is it's going to set up your project for Maya the way that Maya likes things. And there's going to be certain things that she'll assume, okay, for example, where do we put my Maya scene? Well, it's going to be in a folder called the Scenes folder. Where are we actually going to save out our images to? Well, that's going to be in the folder called Images. Where are all of the textures that I'm using to put onto my objects? Well, that would be in the Source Images. Now keep in mind that right now It's unnecessary to worry about all these different folders. But as you get further into this, as things become more advanced and you start learning how to use all these different assets, it's going to be very, very important to keep this in your mind. The project is the first thing that we do. Okay? Now, everything else beyond that is perfectly fine because we have nothing that is special, nothing that is complicated. It's just going to be a good old-fashioned Maya project. And I just hit accept. Now, it doesn't look like a whole lot's happened, but if I come over here into my Documents folder, I can find the 3D Modeling Assignment 1 Maze. So here are all of the different folders that Maya has created for me. And you see here it says Scenes, and if I look inside of it, there's nothing here yet, but that's perfectly fine because I haven't saved my project yet. Now, if I come over into my Maya scene, and I go to File, Save Scene, okay? If I do the Save Scene, it's going to open up and look at where it took me. Right into that 3D Modeling Assignment 1 Maze, into that Scenes folder. See, this is what we were talking about, how Maya likes things the way it likes it. So we have automatically says, okay, if this is a Maya scene, this is where this file is going to be saved to. Now, you have two options down here. There's one called the Maya binary, and there's one called a Maya ASCII file. Now, the difference between these two is very, very simple. A binary file is a file that is made up of nothing but zeros and ones. If you were to open up the file, it just looks like a giant line of zeros and ones. Whereas a Maya ASCII file is actually, it looks like something you could actually read. It's a little bit odd, but you could even open the Maya file into a notepad program, and you could read what the entire program is made of. Now, it's not that critical at this point in this part of your education. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick with the Maya binary. And what that means is that my file is going to be called Cooley, because that's my last name, maze _ and then I could put 01 to let me know that this is the very beginning. There's a few different ways that you could do it, but that's just fine. So here's my name, and when I save it, if I look inside of here, sure enough it says Cooley _ maze _ 01 and then .mb. Okay? Now, by the way, if you have your options on like a Windows 7 or a Windows 8 machine, there's an option inside of your folders, and it says hide extensions for known file types. If this is checked on, you probably won't see this .mb. Okay? So if I have it off, which is what I prefer to see what kind of file I'm actually looking at. I keep that off so that I can see what kind of file I'm actually looking at. Okay? Now, as we start to build our objects inside of this Maya scene, it's going to start to need to be saved again. And there's two ways that you can do this. Now, I'm sure that everybody is already familiar with using the hotkey Control-S, because that's pretty much universal that says save, right? Well, because this is such a complex program, and because the work that you're going to be doing is so important and sort of fragile, I would advise to save in what's known as incremental saves. Okay? Now, there's two ways to do this. Incremental saves simply means that as I begin to make more objects in my scene, I will want to save my scene. But instead of saving my scene, I would come down to Save Scene As. I would use this name, but then maybe I would say 01 becomes 02, and then I would save it again. That way, I still have the last version, but now I'm looking at the new version. Now, some people prefer 01 and then maybe an underscore and a letter. That way, it'll still be under this, but then you'll see that this is sort of a subset of that project you're working on. Okay, so if I do that and I say save as, you'll notice now we have the Cooley Maze 01, that's the first one I did, and then suddenly we have Cooley Maze 01A, which tells me that it's the version after that. Okay, now there's another way to do this, and it's actually by letting the computer figure it out for you. So if I am continuing to work and I'm starting to make my objects and set my scene up, if I come over to File and I go to Save Scene, notice that a lot of these options, they have these little boxes on the outside. This is an option box. This means that instead of clicking on the button here, if I move my mouse over to the end, what I get is a set of options. Okay? Now, this is usually how I do my saving. And by the way, at the beginning, if you've never used this before, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be turned off. But notice it says, I'm allowing incremental saves. Now, if you have a thumb drive or if you have a project that you really don't need that many number of saves, you can also turn on the limitation. And what it does is, when this reaches the 20th save, it'll take the very first one, the oldest file, and simply delete it and continue saving. Okay? Now, 20 different versions of your scene is going to keep you safe. Okay? Because, remember, Maya demands a lot of system resources, a lot of power, a lot of speed, a lot of brain power, a lot of RAM from your computer. And if you have a very large scene, then what's going to happen is the computer is going to have to save over top of the file that you already have. And that opens the door for lots of problems. Whereas by doing this with incremental saves, watch this. I'll hit save. And now I'm going to open up that same folder. And it looks as though I haven't said anything different because here's Cooley Maze 01A. But look at this new folder that was just created for me. This is the incremental save folder. And what Maya did is it automatically created a new folder with the name of my file. And if I look inside of it, sure enough, here is the older version of my file. That means that as we start to continue building our objects, okay, if I hit Save Scene again, knowing that my options are turned on like this, I hit Save. And look at that. Now there's another version inside of that same folder. That means that if anything horrible ever happens to this file, maybe I'm in the middle of a save and the power goes out, so the file is only half written. Maybe I have neglected to save in a really long time, and I go to save, but the computer is just exhausted, and there's no RAM left, and the computer just sort of quits on me. It's not going to be able to get that file back. But because I'm looking at incremental saves, everything inside of here has a much better possibility of staying safe. So this can actually save you a lot of heartache and a lot of problems because it's saving incrementally for you. Now, if you don't have incremental saves limited, if you say I don't want to worry about the number of incremental saves that I have, every time you hit Control S from that point on, it's going to make a new version. So you have to remember that that is going to fill your hard drive fast. Okay? Especially if you have, an 8 or a 16 gigabyte hard drive, these files can really start getting big over time. So just be aware of that. You might come to a point where you hit save and you get an error down here. Instead of this little result, it'll turn red and says, cannot save. But it won't tell you why. And that's when you have to go check the file size or how much space you have left on your thumb drive. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I see what's happening. I don't have any space. It won't save simply because there's nowhere to save it to. Okay, so before I continue, I'm just going to select all of these little blocks that I was making to help my example and just delete them. That way, I'm going to start fresh just like you. Okay? Now, the only thing that we're going to deal with right now is how to move around inside of this view. Okay? Now, it does take two hands to move around inside of this view. All right? So what I'm going to do is with my left hand, I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Okay? So I'm holding down the Alt key right now. And then I'm going to use my mouse, and I'm assuming you're using a standard 2-button mouse with a finger roll, okay, like to scroll up and down documents. And I'm going to use my left mouse button. Now, when I do that, as I hold it down, you notice that I'm getting this new icon appearing. It looks kind of like a hurricane. Well, what it's saying is, as I drag my view left and right, I'm turning around my camera view. Okay, so notice that when I move horizontally, I'm spinning around what would inevitably be my objects. Now, that exact same thing, again, holding down Alt and using my left click button, if I drag up and down, I'm actually going underneath the object or above the object. Okay? Now, these two motions can take place in combination. So, if I start and go left and up, now I'm spinning underneath and turning around at the same time. And notice that it doesn't matter where I put my mouse, it all depends on where I drag it. Okay, so if my mouse is over here, it's still turning and going up and down. If my mouse comes over here, it's still turning and going up and down. Okay, so that's not changing at all. Now, as we're moving around our object, we might want to start seeing it closer up, or we may need to move further away to get a better view. Now, there's two ways to do this. If you have a scroll wheel, you can actually scroll in and out. So if I scroll up, I get closer. If I scroll down, I move away. But depending on what kind of mouse you have, that little clicker, if you're moving it and you feel kind of a little like it's running on teeth, like it clicks as it moves, what it means is that I'm not going to be able to move in and out as smoothly as I could if I do it by myself. Now, again, I'm going to have to hold on to the Alt button, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down on my left mouse button, just like I was before, and I'm going to press down on, pressing down on the scroll wheel. Because if I push down onto my scroll wheel, I can hear a click. And watch, this way, I get a much more sensitive motion. It doesn't jump forward, it actually slides a little easier. Now there's another way to do it, and again it depends on your own personal preference, but you can also hold down Alt and use your right mouse button. So using just the right mouse button, I can zoom in and out again. Now the reason that I showed you the pressing down in the middle mouse button and holding the left mouse button together is actually the original way to use Maya to zoom in and out. Because back in the day, 12, 15 years ago, we had mice that actually just had 3 little clicker buttons. There was no scroll wheel. So not to try to make me sound like I'm an old man's, back in my day, such and such, but I just wanted to show you that there's always more than one way of doing something. So zooming in and out, using either the Alt key and just the right mouse button, or using the left mouse button and pushing in on the scroll wheel also lets you do that. Now, you can work together by zooming in and then spinning around the object, by spinning around and zooming back out. But there's also another move that we can do. Now, if you're familiar with video games, particularly war games where you're shooting at people, there's a phrase commonly referred to as strafing. Okay? And what that means is to move laterally, side to side. Okay? Now I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to press in just with my middle scroll wheel. And you notice that now what I'm actually doing is I'm moving the view, but I'm not moving it forwards or backwards or spinning around. I'm actually moving away from my center point. And then when I start to turn it, notice that this is now my new viewpoint. See how before we were zooming in on this, and so, okay? So instead of being locked to this center point, I'm now able to sort of spin around it from a new view. Now, just to let you guys know, this is the sort of thing that you're going to need to practice. This isn't the kind of thing that I can simply tell you and you're going to get the very first time. What I need you all to do is I need you to practice these motions so that you don't have to think about them anymore. So that without even trying, you can move and strafe and zoom and spin without thinking about it. Instead, I want you to be able to look at the object that you have and tell yourself, I want to see it from over there. And instead of saying, okay, how do I do this? I hold down the Alt key, and then I go into my left mouse button, and I spin around, and then, I try to do this to zoom in. I need all of that to just be a natural thing for you. Now, I understand that this is not the easiest thing in the world to get a hold of. It's kind of like learning how to hold a musical instrument. There is a technique to it, and in order to function properly, this is what you're going to have to do. That's why the first assignment that I'm giving you, to just build a maze out of boxes, is specifically to let you practice moving around in this world. Okay? Now, as we begin to build out our maze, for the time being, for this one project, it may be a good idea to just focus on working inside of this little grid plane, okay? Because this grid plane will help you to sort of ground yourself. Where am I inside of my world? Notice that I can zoom very, very far away, and it looks as though this is a void. It's like we're in outer space and there's just absolutely nothing here. As your projects get bigger and broader and more detailed, you might actually start working out here, but it's not absolutely necessary. Also, let's just say, for example, that you've been practicing zooming in and out, and now you cannot figure out how to get home. Okay? Well, it's a very easy way of doing this. Hit the F key. Did you notice that what happened was we suddenly zoomed in and focused back in our world? This is going to be one of the best keys to play around with, especially when you start building your objects, because if you have one of your objects selected and you hit F, your camera suddenly zooms in and focuses and makes that the center point in your world. So, as we start to build our objects to make our maze, always keep in mind that hitting the F key will help you to frame your work. Okay? Alright, so let's get started. Now, I'm going to come over to Create, and I'm just going to focus right now on polygons. Inside of my polygon primitives, I'm going to simply choose a cube. Now, we have a cube here, and as I zoom in and rotate around it, we can see that it's what's known as a wireframe. We just see the edges that make this polygon. Okay? Now, keep this in mind. This is always going to be your go-to way of getting your view to change. Currently, we are inside of wireframe view, and that is actually, on your keyboard, the number 4. If you want to see this object as if it's a solid shape, all you have to do is hit the number 5. And notice here we have number 5, and this is the shaded view. And now it looks like this object is actually a solid shape. Now, if I select the number 4 key again, notice that we're back inside of the wireframe. And if I hit 5, we're back inside of the shaded view. Just to let you know, the wireframe view and the shaded view are simply for your benefit. Okay? It has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the scene. It's just so that you can see your object either as a wireframe or as a solid shape. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use, and by the way, I'm inside of the move. You notice over here there's a little arrow. Or I can hit the W key, and I can select one of my directions and drag it so that it now looks like it's sitting on the ground plane. Okay? Now, this polygon cube is made up of several what are known as components. Okay? So, right now we are inside of object mode. That means that if I click away from it, it's off the object, and if I click on it, the outline is green to let me know that I am inside of object mode. Okay? Now, if I use my right mouse button, notice that I can click, I'm still holding my right mouse button, and I'm going to drag up to where it says edge. Now when I let go, notice how we've suddenly changed the outline becomes blue to let me know that I am inside of a different mode. I'm inside of component mode. Also, if I move my mouse over to one of these little edge lines, it highlights. That's to tell me that I'm actually selecting one of those edges. And with an object's edge selected, and remember, edges are for polygons, I can, because I'm still inside of my move command, I can now change the shape of my polygon by changing the position of an edge. Okay? Now, I can undo what I just did by holding down the control button and hitting Z, and fortunately I can do it a number of times until I get back to the way that I wanted to. Okay? Now, the edges are only one component of this polygon. If I right click again, notice that over here, and I'm dragging, see how this little string seems to highlight as it gets closer to one of these? I'm going to now choose the vertex. Now the vertex is actually the points where the edges connect. Okay, so if I click on that edge, that vertex point, I can move it around and notice that all of the edges now have no choice but to change as well. Okay, so I don't have to hold down just one. I can hold down my shift key and select another one, and now I'm essentially doing the same thing that I was before, only I'm using the points instead of the edges. I can also grab hold of many of them by using my marquee tool, and the marquee tool is simply the drag and select. See how the little dots make it look like it's telling you what's going to be selected and what's not. So I can select all four of those vertex points, and now I can change the shape of it that way. Okay? Now, if I need to get back into object mode, if I wanted to move all of this object as if it's just one thing, let's say that I changed my shape and I'm happy with what this is, I can right-click on it and simply go back to object mode. And when I do, now I'm inside of my regular move tool, and it just goes back to moving the object. Now, what I can also do is if I'm inside of component mode, and this actually only works with a PC. If you have a Mac, the F8 key means something else to the Mac, so just be careful of that. If I hit the F8 key twice, I automatically go back into object mode too. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I hit that button when I can just right-click on it and go to object mode? And I think it goes back to, I'm a creature of habit. That was the button that I learned 15 years ago, and so that's what I use more often than not. It doesn't matter which way, as long as you're getting the result you want. Now, there's one more component that we're going to look at, and that's down here. It's called the face. Okay? Now, right now, I'm able to see the center of my faces, and that's because my computer is currently set so that I see the center of my faces. But this is going to be something that either your computer is set to, or it might not be. okay? Because everybody's different, everybody has their own specific options, their own likes and dislikes. Some people prefer to see the center line and only be able to select a face from that center, and other people like to be able to just click on anywhere inside of this face, and that's how you would select it. Now, I prefer to see the edge so that I'm not accidentally selecting a face on the other side. Okay? Another thing is that as I start modeling more complicated objects, I'm going to be using a different view than what I'm in right now. And so it's sometimes easier to select the face that I want depending on what view I'm in. Now, for your particular purposes, if you wanted to keep it the way that you see it, that's fine. If you don't see it the way that I see it, if when you move your mouse over any part of this face it turns red, well, that's because inside of your settings and preferences, inside of your window, settings and preferences, if you go to your preferences options box, there's a section down here called selection. And right here it says, how do you want your polygon selection to work? Do you want to select faces with just the center? Or you might have it set to whole face. Now, if I have it set to whole face, I'll hit save. Now, I don't see the polygon center, and the whole thing highlights the moment my mouse moves over it. Now, you noticed, remember last time I did that, I used my marquee and was able to select just this center face. But if I do it now, notice how it grabbed almost the entire object. That's because anywhere that this might touch is now considered a selectable area. Now, for something as simple as what we're doing, you can work with this, that's no problem. But again, I prefer, that's why they call it preferences, I prefer to select just the center. So I'll hit save, so now I can see my center. Okay, so I'm pulling back, and I will go back to object mode. And what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to build my maze. Now, you'll notice that I dragged my object out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my face, and I'm going to pull it all the way to the end. Okay? Now I can take this top face and drag it up. Now I have a wall. Now this wall might be oversized, it might be too fat for your likings, it might be too thin. If you wanted your wall to be fatter or thinner, you can certainly do it. It's up to you. I can right click and go back to object mode, and there's my first wall of my maze. Okay? Now, I have two options at this point. I could simply come back up to the Create options, go to Polygon Primitives, grab a cube, and then change the shape to make a different wall. Or if I know that my outer wall is going to be very similar to the one that I have right now, I can simply use another hotkey, Control D. Okay, that was D as in dog, as in duplicate. So I have Control D. Now it's hard to see, but believe it or not, I actually have two of them sitting in the exact same place. Okay, so I'm dragging the other object, the other polygon face, over, and now I have two walls. Okay, and as I spin around, you can see that they're that far apart from each other, no problem. And now it's time for me to take another one of these and turn it so that it looks in this direction. And there's a few different ways that I could do it. I could try to scale it and then scale it long, or I could hit Control D again. And then notice over here there's a rotation option. Well, I can hit this button to go into my rotation, or remember, W was to move, E is to rotate. Okay? Now, keep in mind this has nothing to do with the word rotate. What we're actually doing is we're using the W, E, R, and T. Technically, we're using the Q, W, E, R, and T on your keyboard because they're all in a row. Now, I can grab one of these lines and I can start to turn my face. Okay? Now, maybe I made this perfectly rotated, or maybe I haven't. really the only way that I'm going to be able to tell is to look in the channel box. Okay? Now, right now what we're looking at is the attribute editor. But notice over here there's another tab. This is the attribute editor tab and it's highlighted. And this is the channel box where I can see exactly how far I've rotated my object. And it says that I rotated in the Y direction negative 90.361. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and take off that 0.361 and hit enter. Now I know that I've rotated it exactly negative 90 degrees. So I can line that up better. And now it's time for me to duplicate it again, so Control D and drag it to the other side. So now what I have is a box that I can begin to build my maze with. Now, if you'd like to, you can take one side of your box and scale smaller, and that can be the entrance of your maze. And you can take the other side and you can scale it, and that can be the exit. Now right now it looks like a very boring maze because you can walk in and then walk out. But it's going to be up to you to decide just how long and how complicated it is to get through the maze. So one thing that you might want to do is look at it from the top like this. I'm just rotating it up. Remember, if you get lost, if it's way over here and you just can't figure out how to get back, remember, the magic button is just hitting the F key, and now we're back to where we started, which is another reason why I suggested just starting to build on this grid. Now, I would highly recommend starting out with a drawing, because if you draw out what your maze will look like, it will be much easier to build it. And keep in mind, always save your work. Okay? Maya can be very finicky, even on very, very powerful computers. Okay? It's one of these programs that it doesn't really matter how much power you have. It all depends on knowing how the program works. And very, very simply put, this program demands power. Okay? So if you have 8 gigs of RAM, if you have 4 gigs of RAM, if you have 45 gigs of RAM, simply put, it wants it all. Okay? So obviously, more powerful computers have a better chance of staying stable and giving you more time to remember to save, but as a good rule of thumb, just make sure you save. And remember, if you are unsure whether or not you're saving in incrementals, just go into the options and make sure that that's turned on. Okay? Alright, so that's going to conclude this first video. All I need you to do is continue practicing moving around, zooming in and out, and then adjusting the positions of your objects. Okay? Now remember, once you get inside, you don't have to use really, really long ones. You can go into your vertex points, grab all of the vertex points on one side, and simply drag it in. Okay? So, have fun with this. If you want to decorate your maze on the outside or on the, on the towers, on all the corners, or however it is you want to do this, make it your own. And by the way, if you're more experienced with this software already, if it's something that is not foreign to you, then be creative. Show me that you know more than what we've just talked about so far. Okay? So, enjoy, have fun, best of luck, and I'll see you later.